Okay, guys, I'm going to do the brachas. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kshan b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu l'asok b'divrei Torah. V'arev na Adonai Eloheinu et divrei Torah b'filu v'fiyav beit Yisrael, v'niyeh anachnu v'tzeitzeinu v'tzeitzeim beit Yisrael, kulanu yodei shumecha v'lomdei toratecha lishma, baruch atah nam lomei Torah l'amo Yisrael.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher b'chabanu mikol hamim v'natan lanu torato, baruch atah na noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen.
Okay. All right, guys. Look, I think Shane Michael couldn't be here. I think because he lost yesterday's work day, he's under a bit of pressure. So what we're going to do is we're going to discuss a couple of the halachas being the 10th of Av, and just for a couple of minutes. Okay. All right. So following halachic nightfall on Tisha B'Av, after 20 minutes after sunset, it's about 20 minutes after sunset, you are permitted to eat and drink. It's customary to recite Birkat Levana, your blessing for the new moon, following Mariv prayers on Motzei Tisha B'Av. It's preferable to eat something small before reciting Birkat HaLevana. Some customary put on regular leather shoes and wash their hands and face before reciting the prayer for the new moon. Although there are those that rule that one should not recite Birkat HaLevana on Motzei Tisha B'Av, Maran Rabbeinu Ovadia Yosef writes that a prevalent custom is indeed to recite Birkat HaLevana at this time. Okay? On Motzei Tisha B'Av, some customarily wash their hands as they would every morning, since on the morning of Tisha B'Av, one may only wash his hands until the knuckles. Thus, some wash their hands once again at this point, and this is a custom, because you can see what they're doing here is they're trying to separate between the 9th of Av and the 10th of Av. This is primarily where that custom came. So it says in Gemara Tani 29a that on the 7th of Av, our enemies entered the base Hamikdash, and on the 9th of Av, shortly before sunset, they set fire to it. So the fire raged on for the entire day until the 10th of Av. So Rabbi Yochanan said, if I were in that generation, I would have established the fast on the 10th of Av, since most of the temple burnt on this day. The sages who established the fast day to be on the 9th of Av were of the opinion that the beginning of the destruction is more severe. So the Talmud Yerushalmi relates that Rabbi Abban would fast on the 9th and 10th of Av. Although our sages do not prescribe the fast to extend for 2 days, since we do not have the strength to endure the fast for so long. Nevertheless, since the 10th of Av is also a day of tragedy and suffering, it is customary not to eat meat or drink wine on the night and day of the 10th of Av until sunset of the 10th of Av. So Ashkenazim customarily abstain from doing so until halachic midday on the 10th of Av. Okay? So Sephardic and Middle Eastern Jews may take haircut and launder clothing on Motzei Tisha B'Av. Ashkenazim, however, customarily abstain from doing so on the 10th of Av. When the 10th of Av falls out on a Friday, which is like today, Erev Shabbat, there's room for leniency in this matter. In other words, if you need to prepare for Shabbat, and just the Gemara in Tani 30b states, anyone who eats and drinks on Tisha B'Av will not merit to see the rejoicing of Jerusalem. Whoever mourns for Jerusalem merits and sees her rejoicing. As the verse states, glad in Jerusalem and rejoice, and all those who love her celebrate with joy, and all those who have mourned for her. So, all right, guys, we're going to end off on that discussion, but today is still considered as quite a serious day. Are you all right, Kabb?
I took some medication and I think it just kind of didn't go down correctly.
Shame, sorry, man.
I have to take it. It's a
All
liquid. Right. It's one of the things, yeah.
Shame, man.
It's gone down badly. It's fine. My throat's very itchy. I might cough for a little while. I don't know what to do.
All right, I understand. Yeah, also with the empathy.
Yeah, I'll mute. Yeah.
Don't disturb us. Just mute, Gavin. Stop in silence. Just wave your hands if you can't breathe. So from Zoom, we can resuscitate and help. You know?
I'm going to wave my hands every time I'm coughing. I'm going to wave my hands every time I'm coughing, so now I'm coughing.
Exactly.
We're thinking the wave.
Okay. All right. And on that note, guys, let me just give you a quick reiteration, right? Rav Elazar says he joins two sentences. What does he join? You are not liable in any case reserved for the damager and on the premises belonging to the damaged party and the damager. So what he does there is he reads it as one sentence. So just like you're not liable if the damaged party goes to the damager's premises without permission, he continues reading the sentence and says, on the premises belonging to both the damaged party and the damager, you're also not liable. Okay? So that's how it's read. But his logic is that to be considered for Shane and Regal is that you damage on the property of another can't occur in a case where you part owner, because it's not of another person. I can't, according to Rav Elazar, damage Gavin's property if we partners because we both own it. It's only if I don't own the property as well that it's considered the property of another. So that's his logic. And his representation in the text is by reading the sentence as one. Premises that is reserved exclusively for the damager, and on premises regarding to both damaged party and damager, you are exempt. Okay, so that's Rav Elazar. Fine. Rav Chisda said in the name of Avima, that basically he understands a case that if I go onto Kevin's property, or my chihuahua goes onto Kevin's property and his Rottweiler eats my chihuahua, he's not responsible because I've got no permission to be on his property. And it's not up to him to check his property vigilantly if I've got no permission to be there. So that logic also makes sense. So that's according to Rav Chisda, because he separates the sentence. So what's the sentence? The first sentence is one is liable for damage done in any place except for premises that is reserved exclusively for the damager. Fine. So that's what his emphasis is. And in a separate sentence, it says, on a premises belonging to both the damaged party and the damager, when one of the animals does damage, the damager is obligated for that damage with the choicest of land. So he's saying if we both own property together and your animal damages my property, and we're obviously talking then in a case of Shane and Regal, specifically because we see the statement with the choicest of land, it means that he obligates. Obviously, for carrying damage, they both obligate, Rav Elazar and Rav Chisda. Why? Because if you're responsible in a public place, of course you're responsible in a private place, irrespective of which argument it goes past. All right. Then what we did is we had the issue of Rav Abaya stating to Rav Zaida that basically in an animal, in a shared property that is reserved. Sorry about this, guys. I just have to answer it. I can't divert it. I'm sorry. Damon speaking. Hello. How can I help you?
Hello, how are you?
All right, and you?
Hello, how are you?
Good, and you?
I'm good, thanks. You were speaking to Popular from the JSE.
Yes.
So, I was on your site, Microsoft Office training the other day, and I was looking for Microsoft Office training course.
With pleasure. I tell you what, I'm in a Zoom teaching meeting at the moment. Just give me your cell number and I'll phone you right back. What is your cell number? 084? What? 757? Yes? 084 757 8176. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. Can I please give you another alternative number?
Yes, please.
071
Yes.
531
531
48.
38.
No, 48.
Sorry, 48. 53. 071 53.
14853.
All right. And what's your name?
My name is Mpo Mbule, M-P-H-O.
Mpo Mbule. All right. I will contact you as soon as I'm done with my meeting. Thank you so much,
Thank you
Mpo.
very much.
Thank you. Ciao.
Bye.
All right. Okay, guys, I apologize about that. Unfortunately, I can't do anything about that. I really, really am sorry. All right. So what Rav Abaya said to Rav Zaida is in that properties that are shared, if both the properties are allowed to have oxen, then the damager is not responsible in that joint property. And with you're only responsible if in a joint property they were only allowed to have vegetation and grow vegetables, and then the damager brought oxen into there. Okay, so we're saying that that's the case, and Rav Zaida works like Rav Elazar and says that you are not responsible, even if it's both for produce and the damager brings oxen there. Why are you not responsible? Because it's not considered the field of another if they're jointly owned. So Rav Zaida is going according to Rav Elazar, okay? And Rav Abaya is going to Rav Chisda that says you are, because the animal has no right to be there. It's just purely for produce. So guys, now that I've summarized it up until this point, it helps. It really, really helps. And now I'm going to share one or two things and it's going to clarify the issue entirely. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Fine. So we're on 14A1. We've gone back and I want to read something to you. In any place that is premises for the damager, but not for the damaged party, the damager is exempt from all liability. That we know. That's not the Chiddush. The Chiddush is this. In a place that is for both this one and that one, such as a yard belonging to partners or an area of open fields, the damager is not liable for shane and regal damage. Okay? Now, this is going according to who, guys? Rav Elazar. Can you see?
Yeah.
Can you say that? Why? Because his son, I think it's his son, Rav Shimon ben Elazar. How do we know it's his son? Because ben Elazar is the son of Rav Elazar, and Rav Shimon has got 4 rules. Let's just state the 4 rules very clearly. The first rule, okay, and this is going to help, I've zoomed in, is in the property of only the victim, one is liable for everything. In the property of only the damager, one is exempt for everything. In the property of the victim and the damagers, such as a joint yard or valley, one is exempt for shane and regal and liable for keren and its tordos. Tam pays half damage and a muad pays full damage. Okay, so we know that you still have to pay for keren. Why? Because even in a public place, you pay for keren. That's very straightforward. Half damages for tam, full damages for muad. But the Rav, Shimon ben Elazar is working in corroboration with Rav Elazar. we said it's not the opinion of Rav Elazar, which lets you know it's not the same person. It's his son. Okay? And therefore he's saying in a joint yard or valley, one is exempt for Shein and Regel because he's holding like Rav Elazar. Why? Because it's not considered the property of another if you joint owner, and it's joining the two sentences, as we said, from where? From the Mishnah. Does that make sense? So that's very, very clear that 14A1 is one of the four rules that is going by Rav Shimon ben Elazar. So now when we're mentioning the fourth rule, okay, and that fourth rule that I'm going to mention now and bringing it forward is in a property not of the victim and the damager, such as a yard that is not of both of them, or a valley, one is liable for Shein and Regel, for Keren and its Tordos. A Tam pays half damages and the Muad pays full damage. So since this fourth rule is also by Rav Shimon ben Elazar, it can't be talking about a third party, and it has to be talking about a specific party. Let me explain to you why, guys. Because if it's from the same guy, it can't be contradicting his previous statement. So Gavin's logic was correct last time. He's saying if you're saying it's not of this one and not of that one, then you could say maybe it's a third party. That's what he was proposing. Am I right, Gav? That's what you were proposing. Yeah. Maybe. But we're saying it's not like that. Why? Because anything to do with a third party, one of two things will happen. Either that person will now have a claim against the damager, where he becomes the victim and a damager, and the case repeats itself all over again. The people have just changed. But then in that case, if it's a third party, he's either the victim and then the damager, and he sues the damager. That's the one option. Or it's not talking about a case where they jointly own a field, because if a third person sues the damager, then it's a case of privately owned property in the field of another. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because if it's of the victim and the damager together as a joint yard, we learned in principle number 3 on the screen, one is exempt for Shein or Regel. And that is the proof that it's not a third party. Because again, if it's a third party, it has nothing to do with the two people that own the joint yard. So then what would happen is it would be a case of, again, a damager and a damaged, at which the damager would be sued by the damaged party, and then those two things would play itself out. Or if there's no owner, then there wouldn't be a court case. But here we're talking again that what is it talking about? Not of both of them. Okay, because one is liable. So if we're saying one is liable, where do we see this principle as one liable? In the victim's property. So Gavin, it can't be talking about the third party, because the third party would then reassert itself, exactly as you said, with a different party of a damaged and a damager. Does that make sense? It might be the same damager, but it would have nothing to do with this case where they own a property together. So here it's talking about a case of the not this one or that one, meaning that they own property together, but one of two things is that it would either be talking about a case of where it's both for vegetation, okay, where the guy had no right to bring an animal there, but it wouldn't talk about that case because Shimon ben Elazar agrees with Rav Elazar that it would have to be known as the field of another. And therefore, it's not talking about that case. It would have to belong to one of them. And who would it belong to? The damaged party. So if it belongs to the damaged party, then we go back to the principle that one is liable for Shein and Regel in the victim's property. So this is proof that it's not talking about a third party. Does that make sense, Gav?
Okay, I'll get that 100%. You've cleared this up nicely. This side of it I'm very happy with. Now, let's just go back right to the beginning, what we learned probably in the first month. That if a animal passes through a third-party field, it's not liable for Shane and Regal.
No, we
Why
didn't
is
say
that?
that. We said in the public domain.
So we did. So a third-party field, if it went into a third-party field, it is liable, eh?
Yeah, it's just what would happen is they don't jointly own the field, and then again you have a victim and a damager. So
Correct.
Then,
so then it'll go the bet then, and it becomes the same sort of case.
Yeah, here we're talking about
Okay, no, then I'm comfortable. No, I'm fine now, Damon. Then I'm okay.
Okay.
You've explained this very well. You clarified this, and the third-party issue. I thought they were exempt.
So how you got the third-party issue, which is very logical, which I'm going to just share in my screen, is if you say it means to the place that is not for this one or for that one at all. In other words, you're adding the word at all, because what it says here is the latter part of the brisa, in a place that's not for this one and not for that one, such a yard that does not belong to two of them, the damager is liable for Shane and Regal done there. So we're saying, but hang on a second. If we say it's not for two of them, it's not for this one and that one at all, it would seem to imply a third party. So you were correct about making that assumption that it would seem to be a third party. But the proof it's not a third party is that if it's basically a third party, then it would be a case of, again, a damaged and a damager, and then a court case would occur. So what we're saying is, what does this then have to do with the fact that not this one and that one? Because Rav Shimon ben Elazar holds by Rav Shimon, the same as Rav Elazar, that in jointly owned field one is exempt. So then, even though the field looks jointly owned, we're saying that in actual fact, it's not technically jointly owned. They seem to have different rights with regards to them. And we're going to see this issue with regards to produce and oxen as discussed.
You know what it might be, Damon? I'm just thinking practically. It could be a field in between them.
No, it's not.
But it's owned by one of the guys.
It's not. It's not. It's talking about a case of well, it is. It's either. You can either say it's talking about the damaged party's field where they're next door neighbors, okay, correct, as you said now, or it's talking about a case where they jointly own the property but they don't have the same sort of rights with regards to people and oxen. So you're right. Then it would be the damaged party still, okay. Yeah. So then I just want to. Go back and then do just a quick rule about this Rabbi Talfon's thing. So basically, we go back and we say Rav Shimon ben Elazar. Okay, I can stop the sharing now. All right. Rav Shimon ben Elazar basically says that on premises that is reserved only for the damaged party, not the damager. The damager is liable in full. Now, why are we saying this in full? Is it's not coming to talk about Shane and Regal. Why? Because even Rev Eliezer said that if you come into my property, we're not talking about a jointly owned yard. If you come into my property, okay, and your cow eats my cow or tramples, your cow eats my field or tramples on my field, you have no permission to be on my property, and then you're liable in full. So it's not stating the obvious, Rav Shimon ben Elazar, nor is Rav Elazar, because that's obvious. What it's coming to say is you have to pay full damage. It's a given that you pay for Shane and Regal in the damaged party because you've got no permission to be in my property. But what it's saying is, according to Rabbi Talfon, is if your ox comes into my private property, there's no such thing as tam and muad in my private property, according to Rabbi Talfon, for keren damage. Obviously, if your ox comes into my property, you're responsible for full payment for Shane and Regal. because there's either exemption in the public domain or full payment. It's only in regard to keren that there's a principle of a tam payment, of half payment with the gufa of the animal, versus a muad ox, which is full payment from choice property. There's no partial payments. So any time it mentions shein or regal, in a public domain, you exempt. In a private domain that you've come, your ox has come to my property in the field of another. In other words, you've come to my field, you're responsible and full. So it's not teaching the obvious. What Rabbi Tarfon is saying is, if your ox comes into my property, my private property, tam is not half damages. It's full damage. It's only half damages in the public domain where both oxen have the right to be.
Okay, so based on what you're saying now, Damon, it means that tam and moad, from what, if I'm right, unless I missed the point, is that tam and moad is only applicable in the public domain then?
Yes, according to Rabbi Tarfon, however...
Yes, based on what you just said.
Yes, according to Rabbi Tarfon. But according to the rabbis, Rabbi Tarfon and the rabbis agree with regards to the public domain. There is tam payment, which is half payment with the gufa of the animal in the public domain by both Rabbi Tarfon and the rabbis. But the dispute with Rabbi Tarfon and the rabbis is in my private domain. When your ox comes to my private domain, okay, Rabbi Tarfon says you have no business being there. And since you have no business being there, you're not having a leniency. You're paying full damages from choice property. And the rabbis are saying that leniency still applies. If it's a tam animal, you pay half damages from the gufa of the animal. The dispute is only in regards to if you're coming to my private property with Rabbi Tarfon and the rabbis. It's very easy.
Okay. But the rabbis win basically.
Well,
we go according to the rabbis.
Exactly. Let's just finish Kevin.
But he does have a very valid point.
Yes, but he does. But Kevin's got to leave for a nun in a few minutes, so let's just wrap it up.
So wrap it up. I'm done.
Thank you, let me finish, Kev. The Gemara answers, yes, we can indeed say that the brisa is is formulated in this manner. So let me just tell you what it's saying. So it's saying that the first part of the brisa, is basically teaching. The first part of the brisa is basically teaching that it's going according to Rabbi Tarfon's view. Okay, and Rabbi Tarfon's view is saying that it's proof that it's occurred in the damaged person's yard, because for keren damage, according to Rabbi Tarfon, you pay full damages. Okay, and then the second part of Rav Elazar's rule is according to the rabbis, who state that even in a private field, of the damaged party, you still pay tam damages. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay. So what we're coming to say is, you see, basically, on Mishnah 24b, there is a case in that Mishnah where the first part of the Mishnah goes according to Rabbi Tarfon, and the second part of the Mishnah goes according to the rabbis. So we both here agree that it's not a contradiction when we're talking about in the field of not this one or that one. We are talking about in a case of the damaged party's field, and the reason being is in a jointly owned field, according to Rav Elazar, they exempt. Okay, they exempt. So we must be talking about the damaged party's field. So we're saying we can learn from Rabbi Tarfon that in a damaged party's field, the damager had no right to be there, so it's full payment for tam, and as well as for mud. And the rabbis say no, the leniency to pay half damage from the gufa of the animal still occurs for tam, because the second part of the brisa is according to the views of the rabbis with regards to animal damage. But according to the view of the rabbis, we still, whether you're talking about Rabbi Tarfon or the view of the rabbis, we are still saying that this damage has occurred in when we say a land, field, a property not of this one and that one, we're not talking about jointly owned partners. We're saying in the field of the damaged property. Does that make sense? In a privately owned damaged property. It's not the joint field.
Got it.
Shmuel said, and we're finishing just in a few minutes, then we're done. Shmuel said to Rav Yehuda with respect to another Mishnah, okay? This is what he said, sharp one, leave the Mishnah alone and follow me. So it was a compliment that Shmuel referred to Rav Yehuda sharp one. He meant he had an extremely sharp analytical mind. And he was saying, stop trying to put the entire part of the Brisa or the Mishnah according to just one opinion. Rather, just like with the Mishnah that we stated in has one part according to Rabbi Talfon and the other part according to the rabbis, so too with this Brisa, it has according to Rabbi Talfon and according to the rabbis in the property of the damaged party. Fine. Then the Gemara offers only one other solution, which is what Gavin mentioned. Ravina said in the name of Rava, the entire Brisa can be representative of Rabbi Talfon's view. What? So we can say the opening ruling is very, very simple. Why? Because as far as carrying damage is concerned, it makes sense that you pay full damages. Because according to Rabbi Talfon, if it's damaged in private property, there's not the leniency of Tom, only in the public domain. So that makes sense. But then the second part, and what does the Brisa mean when it speaks in the last row of a place that is not for this one and not for that one? And which we explained above means that it's not for both, but rather for one. So what we're saying is it can talk in a case here where it actually is a jointly owned yard, but they have different rights. So it means that the damaged party in this case had the right to grow produce there, but then both of them had the right for oxen. Does that make sense? Both of them had the right for oxen.
Yep.
So in a case where only the damaged party had right for produce, but both had the right of oxen, we still determine in that case that he's considered liable. Why is he considered liable? For a simple case that because according to Rav Chisda, the ox should have been the ox should have been protected against damaging the jointly owned yard of the person who had the produce. Okay, and accordingly, what it's actually saying is that just because there were oxen there doesn't exonerate in a jointly owned yard the damager from making restitution. It only exonerates in terms of carrying damage. So this is what we're saying. Say, Gavin, in an example where you and I own a yard together, right? And we both can keep our oxen there. Then even Rabbi Talfon says it's like a public domain, that if your ox damages my ox, you only pay Tom half damage, even though we jointly own it. Does that make sense? Because
it's fair to be there.
Yes, both oxen are entitled to be there. So in that particular case, you only have to pay me time damages because you're allowed on the property. It's not reserved just for me. It's for both of us.
It's not private.
Yes, it's not private. So therefore, if your ox damages mine, it's time. Even Rabbi Talfon would agree. That's what Ravina is saying in the name of Rava. So, but we're saying with regards to produce, there, according to Rabbi Talfon, if your ox tramples on my produce or it eats part of my field, you are responsible for full damages. Why? Because you should have guarded your ox. Okay? And it's not seen as the public domain because it's considered my field as well. It's not the public domain. it's considered the field of another because we both own it together. It's private property. But if you hold, according to Rav Elazar, okay, Rav Elazar said in that particular case, you would still be exempt. And what's his reason? Because the field of another cannot be considered a case where you also are part owner. In the field of another means you have no ownership. It means another person's field. You don't have part ownership. And the fact that we learned in the Mishnah, if we just share the screen here, that he talks about the case that he extends the sentence that is reserved exclusively for the damager and on premises belonging to the damaged party and the damager. Okay, so according to Rabbi Talfon, it's if it's jointly owned field, according to Ravina on Rava, he's saying the whole brisa can go by Rabbi Talfon because it's still privately owned by both of us. It's half damages for Tam and full for Muad, because both our oxen have a right to be there. If it's on my property totally, and you have no right to be there, it's full damages for Tam according to Rav Eliezer. Same as with Muad, and the rabbis say it's still half for Tam, even if it's on the damaged property field. Right. Rav Chisda says you're liable in all cases in jointly owned field. Why? Because if we both had produce there, why? You have no right to have your ox there. If we both have oxen there, you are exempt according to Shein and Regel, even by Rav Chisda standards. Are you with me? If we both have the right to have oxen there. All right, guys, I hope this clears it up.
Thank you. Yes. Have a great
Damon, I just want to say, firstly, thank you so much for all the work you put into to resolve this matter.
Going the extra mile.
Yeah, going the extra mile, which Kevin actually normally does for us. He does the extra 20 miles. But listen, Damon, because of our health issues, going an extra mile is quite good for us. I appreciate you going the extra mile. I know you had to converse with Rabbi Cohen to get this outcome. I know half of it's from, you said half of it's from you and half of it's from him. So I appreciate both of you. I know you put a lot of effort in. Rabbi Cohen probably gave it to you in an instance, but you actually